welcome back. We are back on the record in the matter of Commonwealth versus Chastity Michelle Brock, 20T9814. And who would you like to call next?
The Commonwealth now calls Courtney Allen.
Courtney Allen. Come on up, Ms. Allen. Come stand over here, and I'll swear you in just a second.
Oh, stand right here?
Yeah, because you're going to be sitting right there. So
Oh, okay.
That's right there's fine. Okay, okay. So that's okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Be careful. There's some trip hazards.
Good afternoon.
Hello,
Could you please state your name
Courtney Allen,
and where do you work?
Baptist Health Hardin.
Okay, what is your job?
I'm a registered nurse in the emergency department, but I'm also part of the same forensic team at the hospital.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that.
The hospital?
Well, about both your job
Oh, okay.
responsibilities.
So in the ER, I work full-time in the emergency room, and I take care of the patients down there in emergencies. Sometimes I'm on the trauma team. Sometimes I take care of a team. It just depends. And then my other job in the hospital is I'm a part of the SANES forensic team. I'm a forensic nurse, so I collect evidence and take care of patients that are either sexually assaulted, abused, and have evidence to collect for them for future court cases.
How long have you worked at the hospital?
2 years.
Okay. Where were you working in November of 2020?
I was working at Hardin County Detention Center and Louisville Metro.
Okay, and as a nurse, I assume?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your education and background.
I've been a nurse for over 7 years. I started out as an LPN and worked in long-term care, and then I went to corrections. So I was an LPN actually when I was working at the jail, but I was in RN school, and I graduated with my RN in September of last year.
Okay. Are you a certified phlebotomist? Or certified in phlebotomy?
Yeah, all nurses have to be.
Okay. And so back on November 7th of 2020, you were certified to draw blood from someone?
Yes.
Okay. Now, on September 7th, you said that you were working at the detention center?
Yes.
What time were you working?
I work night shift. I work 7 p to 7 a.
Okay. So a little after 7 p.m. On that date, did you make contact with Miss Chastity Brock?
Yes.
Can you identify her, please?
Yes. She's sitting over there.
Okay. And what was your interaction with her?
She was brought in with Trooper Wright, and she came in for her charges that she was being brought in for. All I was doing was asking questions for medical standpoint. We do the intakes kind of out there because it was also during COVID, so we always had to screen everybody for COVID questions. And we also did blood draws if the officers had asked us for that, and she consented to it.
Okay. How many blood draws do you think you've done in your career?
Too many to count. I have no idea.
Okay. And you always do them the same way?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is an older kit. Does this look familiar to you?
Yes.
What is it?
That's the toxology blood draw kits that we use.
Okay.
Well, that they use.
Does every law enforcement officer that asks for a blood draw use this?
Yes, they all use the same one.
Okay. So tell me about what happened when you drew Miss Brock's blood.
So when we draw the blood, we prepare the site and we draw the blood and we put them back in the containers and we forward the chain of custody back to the officers.
Your Honor, at this point, I would just like to clarify for the record, is the witness testifying about specifically the case with Ms. Brock, or is she testifying generally about her procedures? Because I'm a little confused.
Okay. Yeah, we do need to, I think, a little better to define that. Okay.
Okay. Tell me about what is standard practice for drawing blood. How do you prepare the site? How do you perform the blood draw?
Okay, for every blood draw that you perform, you will first find whatever vein you're going to use or vessel. You will tourniquet the site off. You will cleanse it with betadine, and you will then inject the needle, draw the blood. You have to invert the tubes to make sure that the chemicals that are inside the blood tubes will interact with the blood itself, and then you put them back in the containers and you apply a 2x2, release the tourniquet, and apply tape or tegaderm or something to cover it to secure the gauze after you've completed it.
Okay. Why do you use betadine?
You use betadine because you don't want any chance of any isopropyl alcohol from like alcohol swabs to be contaminating the actual blood that you draw, if it's for an alcohol or toxicology purpose.
Based upon your training and experience as a nurse at different levels, is that standard across the board?
Yes,
That is what all nurses would use to clean a site for a blood draw?
for a blood draw, yes. Not so much for if you inside IVs for different purposes.
Okay. Now, you talked about the chemicals in the tubes. I guess as part of being a nurse and if you're preserving a sample, what does your training tell you about what is in the tube?
Well, all tubes have different things in them, so it just depends on what the tubes are. Some of them have anticoagulants in them to keep them preserved.
Okay. Now, as I said, this is one of the older kits. It still has the urine sample. But is this about the size of the tube that they use?
Yes.
Man, first witness, please. All right, in this tube, there's some powder in the bottom.
Yes.
Is that present in all the tubes that you see?
In all the gray tubes, yes.
Okay, tell me what that means.
It's just the powder that helps preserve the blood so that it doesn't coagulate over time.
Okay. And so that is something, that helps, you said preserve it so that it can get to the lab for testing.
Yes.
You don't do the testing, right?
No, I do not.
Okay. Now, specifically, I want to talk about Ms. Brock. When you took her blood, did you follow those standard procedures?
Yes.
Did you clean her arm with betadine?
Yes.
Did you draw
Objection,
her?
Your Honor, counsel is testifying, leading questions.
I can rephrase if it,
I don't think that was a leading,
There
well,
was a series of leading questions, Your Honor.
all right, try to rephrase.
how did you clean the site on Ms. Brock's arm?
With betadine.
Okay. Did you properly, did you apply a tourniquet, and if so, where?
Yes. On her arm, on her upper arm.
Okay. What did you do with her sample after you extracted it?
I put the tubes back into the box and handed them directly to Officer Wright.
Okay. Did you follow standard procedure at all times?
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Foreman?
Yes, Your Honor. Can we do this? Good afternoon, Ms. Allen.
Hello.
All right, so we had a little bit of a discussion about your standard operating procedures in blood cases generally, right?
Mhm.
We heard about those. Please remind me, how long have you been a nurse?
7.5 years?
7.5 years, so that's a long time.
Yes.
Is one of your primary duties is as a phlebotomist, as someone who draws blood?
Every nurse will draw blood at some point in their career, yes. And I do it very often.
Okay. In November of 2020, you were about 5.5 years
Yes.
into your career as a nurse,
hmm
and you were a registered nurse
I was an LPN at the time of.
at the time.
Yes.
So
I'm
at
a
the time you were an
registered nurse
LPN and you are a registered nurse
now.
today.
Yes.
Okay. So as an LPN, because I know this may sound a little weird since you're not an LPN anymore, but we kind of have to teleport, we need to travel back in time to November 7th, 2020, because that is what the jury is going to be deciding in this case, okay?
Yes.
So please do not take it as an insult to me calling you as an LPN. I just need to go back to November 7th of 2020.
That's understandable.
Okay?
Mhm.
All right. So you talked about the proper procedures that you have done, that you do generally in cases before you draw blood, right?
Yes.
And then you started talking about, and I apologize that I myself got a little lost, where the line was drawn between what standard operating procedures are versus what happened on November 7th of 2020. So let's clear the air, okay? You said that you recognize Miss Brock, correct?
Yes.
Is it because she is seated next to me or because you remember her face?
Because I remember her face.
How many blood draws have you done since November 7th of 2020? Would you
I do not
estimate?
recall.
Why is Ms. Brock sticking out in your mind?
Well, because when I got the subpoena for court, I also went through my nurse's notes from when that night occurred, when I worked at the jail.
Gotcha. Okay, so it was kind of like a refreshing of your recollection.
Yes,
Because do you keep meticulous notes on every, I guess you would call patient that you
Yes.
extract blood from?
Yes.
Because at that moment when Ms. Brock was post-arrest, pre-draw, I guess, do you approach her as a patient?
yes, everybody's a patient.
Everybody is a patient.
Mhm.
Okay. You testified that the extraction of the blood was at the Hardin County Detention Center.
Yes,
Would you refer to the Hardin County Detention Center as a septic or antiseptic environment?
it's an antiseptic environment, but you still can clean the area for it to be sterile.
What area are you referring to? Because let me rephrase the question maybe so that we can understand
Okay.
my question, okay? When I talk about septic versus antiseptic environment, in my
Actually,
mind...
Judge, that's testimony.
Yes, don't testify, just ask her.
Okay, all right, I'll rephrase, Your Honor. Jails are dirty, correct?
Everywhere's dirty, but yes.
Okay. Prior to extracting the blood from Ms. Brock, where did you take her?
She was in the Sally Port where everyone is when we first initially encounter them.
And the Sally Port is where cars come in and out, police cars, right?
No, there's a room off the Sally Port which we have all intake inmates be at.
Okay, so paint me a picture, okay? Because I wasn't there.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a room that the cars come in for the police officers, and they have garage doors that open and close for them to leave. Off of that is a little room that has cameras in there that watches inmates come in and out that the officers bring in. In that room is where the officers will talk to the inmates when they come in. They can ask them questions, but we also had a drawer of medical equipment that we would use to help with any blood draws, anything that we did out in the Sally Port area.
Okay. Do you frequently use that room to extract blood from patients?
Yes, for blood draws for the officers, we use that room.
Yes, I'm sorry, that's what
Yes.
I'm referring to. With
Mhm.
respect to the legal portion of your work. Because I
Yes.
also understand you said you work for, well, Louisville Metro is also a police agency. Do you work, you said you work for a hospital now?
Yes.
But before then, you were working for jails, basically?
Mhm.
Hardin County and
And
Louisville Metro in
Mhm.
downtown Louisville. Okay. So this little room, let's talk about this little room that you extracted blood from Ms. Brock in.
Okay.
Okay? Are there chairs, tables? What's inside this room?
So there is tables that the officers will sit at. There's a bench that you can cuff patients or inmates to whenever they need to be. But there's also a chair that we use for blood draws, which is a chair specifically made for blood draws because it has a, it's kind of hard to explain, but they have the armrests on them where you can pull the armrests out so that you can have their arms lay on them.
Okay. Prior to placing Ms. Brock in that chair, did you disinfect the area?
We clean all the chairs when we're out there. And I'm not saying it was necessarily right when she got there, but the jail itself cleans that outside. Yes.
So you did not,
I did not personally, no.
and you don't know when was the last person that cleaned that chair?
I do not.
In your testimony, in my experience, there are certain, and you already testified to some of this, there are certain proper procedures that must be followed in order to avoid further contamination of the blood sample, correct?
Yes,
One of them is the wearing of gloves.
yes.
I did not hear any testimony about you putting gloves on prior to extracting blood from Ms. Brock in this case?
Well, everybody should wear gloves before they draw blood, and I was wearing gloves because there's always high risk of me getting some kind of infection from blood.
And you're remembering this, or are you speculating because
No,
that is
I
proper
remember this.
procedure?
I've never drawn blood without gloves on in my entire career.
I'm going to ask you one more time.
Yes.
In this particular case, on November 7th of 2020, were you or were you not wearing gloves?
Yes,
Question
I
asked and
was.
answered.
Yes, ask and answer.
Could you please, and I'm going to ask you to go into very intimate detail for purposes of protection of the record and the understanding of, ladies and gentlemen, of the jury who are going to be deciding this case, okay? So pay attention to my question. I want you, and please do this very slowly. I mean, you're more than welcome to go fast, but I would prefer, not just for my sake, because you know this backwards and forwards. You've done too many to count, which I imagine there might be in the tens of thousands. I have never done a blood draw myself, okay? We have a few jurors who have done them in their careers. We have others that have never done them, okay? So for purposes of the record, could you please start, and we got the first part. The first part is you did not disinfect personally, you did not disinfect the area where Ms. Brock was sitting to have her blood extracted. She sat down in this chair. Can you please walk us through what you did with Ms. Brock on November 7th of 2020?
Yes, so when the officer had told me that he was requesting a blood draw, so we listened to her consenting to the blood draw. I then prepared everything that I needed to get for the blood draw itself, which is a butterfly needle, the vacutainer itself, the betadine swab, the 2x2s, the tape, and the tourniquet, with also the gloves. And she sat in the chair. He went over all the documents with her. She consented to the blood draw. I applied the tourniquet to her arm, cleaned the area with betadine, found the vessel that I was going to use, inserted the needle, drew out the blood, placed the blood into the containers, and handed them back to him after I'd already took the tape, placed it back on where the 2x2 was after I pulled the needle.
And that is exactly how you performed the blood draw on November 7th of 2020 on Ms. Brock, correct?
Yes.
Now I noticed you did not mention that you did not use the betadine to disinfect the top of the tubes of the vacutainers, correct?
You don't have to use betadine on the top of the tubes. You only cleanse the skin with them.
Okay. But you did not cleanse the
No.
vacutainer tube, correct?
Yes.
What about, you mentioned something about inversions. What are inversions? What are they for?
You just turn the tube upside down for a second and back like 2 to 3 times, which helps mix the anticoagulant inside the tubes to prevent coagulation as long as it sits.
You were shown a vacutainer tube from an old kit in this case by the prosecution. I see that. Is that it? So in this particular kit, as the prosecutor's already alluded, I'm not going to hold you to this because I know we have a slightly different kit, but there are 3 tubes, and in our case we have 3 tubes as well, correct?
Yes.
In one of the tubes, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
In one of the tubes, the gray top tube has some powder in it, correct?
Yes.
What color is the powder in this particular vacutainer?
White.
On November 7th of 2020, before you extracted the blood from Ms. Brock, did you have a similar tube such as the one that you're holding?
Yes.
What color was the powder in that tube?
White.
Okay. Now, if I may approach again, Your Honor, I'm going to trade you for one of these purple tops. Now this, in our particular case, and I'm going to show you, we have the blood kit after arrival to the lab in just a moment. But we also have 3 tubes, only in this case, do you remember what color tube tops there were?
Yeah, there was 2 gray and 1 purple.
2 gray and 1 purple.
Yes.
In the purple tube top that I just handed to you, could you tell me what is inside this tube?
They usually have a clear liquid in it. I don't know for certain if it's heparin or not, but usually it's some type of anticoagulant, but I cannot tell you for sure what is inside of it.
Because you don't know?
Because I do not run the test, so I do not know.
May I approach you, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. So in this case, and if, Your Honor, if I may have the computer hook up, please.
Okay.
In this case, as I said, we had a one second, let me wait for it to pull up. This is showing a black screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Does this look familiar?
Yes.
What are we looking at?
That's the top of the box that has the blood in it.
The top of the box that has the blood in it?
Yes.
And these are the 3 tubes that you filled out, correct?
I did not fill them out. The trooper did, but I was there.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, filled them with blood.
Yes.
I apologize. Not the writing on,
Yes.
on the tubes. The writing on the tubes was not done by you, correct?
Yes.
But the 3 vials that are filled with blood, you had performed that, correct?
Yes.
And that was done on November 7th of 2020, correct?
Yes.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor. That's all the questions.
Okay, thank you. And any follow-up?
I have just one.
Okay.
How did you clean the site for blood draw? Did you wipe or rub it?
White.
So one time across,
Mm-hmm.
one direction, I mean?
Yeah, one direction, not one time. You got to clean the whole area. Yes.
Thank you, that's all I have.
No follow-up.
Okay. May this witness be excused?
Judge, I would ask to retain her until the close of evidence.
Okay, if you don't mind, then we'll have you hang around, but you'll need to sit outside. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.